Hi there. I've had people in some of my other videos comment asking about standardized testing and the state testing. And I wanted to take a little bit of time today to explain the environment of the school and the classroom during standardized testing times. Um, this is not so much a research focused video. I am doing some research on the impacts and the effects of standardized testing, the purpose of it, and things like that. That will be later videos. But for today, I just want to share my insight as a teacher who's worked in the classroom where her students are being tested, as well as in a school where all teachers and all students do get impacted by standardized testing. So this is my experience. I might share an experience that I've heard from other teachers, from other educators who have shared their experiences with standardized testing. But this is more just informative on environment rather than something that I've researched. Those videos I will be getting content for so that I can share that with you. I wanted to start with the fact that standardized testing lasts weeks. It's not a few days. One subject might be a few days, but it lasts weeks. And it starts as young as third grade for a lot of states. A lot of information is state by state differentiated, so it might be different according to state, but all the states I've had experience in, I believe, all start in third grade. I've worked in a district where they require students in primary grades to practice that environment in that kind of testing situation. So they're pretty much just in a standardized testing environment to kind of get used to it. 6 and 7-year-olds practicing these tough skills. So I have seen it implemented in younger students, but it's not state mandated. So let's talk about the classroom itself. First thing I want to share is that we are required pretty much everywhere I've ever taught and everywhere I've learned about standardized testing in other states is all content, all posters, all anchor charts, all student work, anything that students might be able to reference and use on a test is covered up or taken down. So I want to share that we put anchor charts up, we put student work up, we put these posters and all this information up on the board to encourage students to reference them all year. And then we get to these standardized tests where we're told, no, that's cheating. Like, kids can't be using these references. They can't use the things that they've been creating all year to help them on these tests, which I find frustrating. It also is a lot of outside work. We're not getting paid to take all this down or to cover it up. We don't get paid overtime for that. So that is a start. And then you think, okay, these students during these weeks that they're coming in are coming into a classroom that no longer looks as familiar as it once did. How does that impact students who are about to sit down during a stressful time taking a test? Is that going to comfort them? Is that going to help them feel welcomed and successful when they're coming into a blank space or a hidden space? So that's something I consider about testing that does have an impact. It might not be huge, but there is an impact there. Another thing that happens during tested is students are given dividers at their tables. The desks are separated. The tables are separated. You get as much space between you and another student as possible. Now, I have had 25 students in my classroom and we didn't have desks. The separation is only so much, so that's where these dividers come in. Never in the year do I give them dividers. We might have practiced with them a few times during independent work or during other like reading tests or math tests just to get them used to this. because it's very isolating, right? Your whole frame of reference just changes to a cardboard box. But also, I like to think about how these dividers show the students that we don't trust them not to cheat. And yes, you will run into students who look on other people's paper. I'm pretty sure that every person going through school at one point or another has thought, I am not confident in what my knowledge is. Maybe I should look around me for some guidance. Not saying that we should. Cheating's not a good choice. But we all run into that once in our lives, and we're basically just telling these kids, we don't trust you. So they're coming into a different environment, and we're showing them by making them put up these dividers that you are isolated, you are on your own, and we don't trust that you won't cheat. That's what they're getting when we put up these dividers. On the days of testing, all the testing classes have to take turns using the bathroom because students are not allowed to use the bathroom during testing. So I like to think, like, as an adult, do you feel comfortable when you're told that you can't take care of your bodily needs? Because I don't. I've spent years as a teacher not drinking water because bathroom breaks didn't happen for me, and it never felt comfortable. Now we're asking these students as young as 8 and 9 to not take care of their bodies, not take care of their bodily needs because of a test, because of this standardized exam that they're expected to focus 100% on without any bodily needs, any bodily issues coming up and distracting them. Food, water, those things are also out during testing, not allowed to happen. So they don't get to take care of themselves while they're trying to focus on something that is typically very stressful for most kids because of how much pressure is put on them by society, by everyone talking about testing. So once students are seated and the teacher opens the testing boxes, teachers don't have permission. They don't have the trust of the states giving the test to read something that's not on a script. Because God forbid you give them a clue that might help them on one of the questions at some point. So teachers get a script, and we are not allowed to deviate from that. So as soon as the testing materials are opened, I don't get to speak freely to my students. Students with questions or needing advice get one scripted response, and it's usually something like, you have X amount of minutes to finish this test. And it's actually about all we can say. It might vary state to state and district to district, but that's it. I don't feel good about that as a teacher. I feel horrible by not being able to sit with a kid and be like, hey, you've worked too hard this year. You are going to rock this. Or a kid who you know is going to struggle and say, you know what, this is going to be hard, but I know you're going to try your best, and that's all I ask for. And we can't say any of that. So do you think students are going to feel comfortable with teachers ignoring their questions, basically, ignoring any statement of their needs? Will they feel confident in what they have to do that day in regards to the test? Ways that I tried to help as a teacher before any test, especially standardized testing. I used to have brain sprinkles, which was really like Mardi Gras beads in an old coffee creamer mug, or not mug, but like a coffee creamer bottle. And I would just go around and sprinkle it on them. But you have to do that before the bathroom break, because when you return, you're done. You're done sharing with kids. So I would just pour brain sprinkles on them. Just a fun little thing that they really enjoyed. They would request it and things. Another thing that I would do, and I would teach them this weeks before we took our tests, was, hey, let's think of a hand signal, some kind of gesture that I can give to you so you understand that, like, this is what I want to say and can't say. We actually, the last year I did standardized testing, I made a poster and, like, what are things that I tell you when things are hard? And the kids told me and I wrote it down. And I was like, all right, these are all things that I'm going to want to say to you during the test. Again, like, this poster could not stay up during the testing so the kids could reference that and feel good about themselves. It had to come down. So I was like, all of these things here, I can't tell you because I have to read a script. They do not allow me to. What can I do? What kind of gesture, what kind of action can I do to let you know that I believe in you? I know that this is hard, but you are going to try your best. I know that, and that's all I ask. I just want you to try your best. And so we came up with, like, thumbs up or a heart or something like that I could just, they'd look up at me and I do it, and that would hopefully just help them through because I can't say anything different. And if this gets me into trouble, I don't know what to say. I don't regret the choices. Anyways, that's how I tried to help. I don't know if it actually makes a difference. I do not think, I don't even think I remember any of my standardized testing scores. I know I should care more about knowing them, or I should have cared more about knowing them, but I didn't. Because I am not on board with standardized testing, especially in elementary school. If you think about, like, when in your profession, in your job, in your career, have you had to sit in an environment of total silence with nothing around you, with dividers up, and been told to do your work? Have you ever been asked? Like, it's not something that happens. That's not something we should expect young children to have to deal with when we as adults wouldn't want to do it anyway. But, so that's kind of the classroom environment. And the teacher who is administering these tests has to go to a special training every year on how to administer these tests, which is really just like, you're going to get these materials. Here's your script. Don't deviate. The consequences, those are listed off for you. It could affect funding or your school's standing, or whether or not those scores for your class are recorded. Because if you break the rules, we can't trust that your kids did their best because you broke a rule. So we get this training every year. And on the day of testing, we have to go to the office, check our materials, make sure we have all the numbers, all the kids' names on there, which this is an administrative, like, job to get everything ready. And they're missing out on doing other aspects of their job while they're getting the whole school's testing materials ready. Something to think about. We have to sign everything out, sign these little disclaimers saying, like, I know the rules, I'm going to follow them. We have to turn in our phones because we as educators are not trusted to not cheat for our kids, to not look up answers for them. I don't quite know. Share test questions with other educators. Like, the worries they have are not concerns that I don't think any teacher has, because it's silliness. It's just blatant kind of hit to the face. We don't trust you. We take our testing materials. We cannot be out of sight of these testing materials while they're in our hands. So if we have to go to the bathroom before testing or after testing, they go into the bathroom with us, which just feels kind of gross. Just saying, it doesn't feel like a clean thing to be doing, especially after a pandemic where clean was like what we were talking about. But anyways, again, consequences of breaking these rules, of talking to kids outside of the script, of leaving things up on the wall, of, not handling the materials appropriately. It might invalidate our scores. So none of that will be able to count toward our school. We get in trouble. Our school gets in trouble. The district might even get in trouble. We might lose funds. We might lose our academic standing. Yeah, just a whole bunch of stuff can happen with silliness, just utter silliness. All right. So that's teacher during the testing. It's really hard. We're not allowed to sit down. We're not allowed to hang out on our computer. We can't do anything except walk around and monitor. We're not allowed to read the test. We're not allowed to read the questions that they have because that could invalidate our kids' scores. It's, again, very state to state, but it's all just so nitpicky. It's ridiculous. So not all students will stay in your classroom. There are some accommodations that might qualify some of your students to get a separate testing setting. For example, students with special needs have the special education teachers. They'll pull them and put them into a smaller setting and give them the test that way. That might be their only accommodation. So like read aloud, access to certain resources and things. Those are other accommodations. English language learners, or here in Colorado, they're called culturally and linguistically diverse learners. They can sometimes, depending on how their level of English language development, they might get a smaller setting, or if it's their first year in the United States, they get exempt from the reading test. Not the math test, not the potential like social studies or science test, but from the reading test, they can get exempt if they are brand new, but only for a year. These accommodations, everywhere I have experienced, they have to be requested early in the year. So if you are still getting to know your kids and there are issues you don't know have existed or are researching and trying to figure out and trying to like collect data on with your students, and you go beyond that kind of cutoff for the state to grant accommodations, then that child is not going to get them. And you can't like play it safe because they definitely won't get it even if you request it early and they're not qualified to receive special education services. It seems like, and this is where like I don't know for sure, but as a teacher, the state, and again, varies by state, does not want to give many accommodations because it's seen as assistance and guiding them. They want the students to deal on their own. Whereas in the classroom, sometimes I read the directions to my students depending on where we are in the year, because I'll scaffold test taking skills and strategies. I play quiet music. There are quite a few YouTube channels out there that just play like piano music or acoustic music. And I play that because it calms my students. I think about the lighting in my classroom and I put up twinkle lights because you can still see, you can still do your work, and it's softer, but you can't do these things during testing. So the things that my students have gotten accustomed to are now taken away because it's an accommodation that general education students could not receive. Actually, I don't think anybody would get an accommodation to play music or have twinkle lights on. But like I said, these accommodations are hard to get and you have to have valid reasoning. Parents, in most places I've heard, can opt out of testing, have their kids opt out of testing. But other than that, every student is required to take it. I have had one student who my school and the student's parent worked to make sure that she was not a part of the testing environment, mainly because of the behaviors that she would express in the classroom were very distracting and very just not helpful for other students who are trying to learn, let alone take a test. Working with that child's parent. We were able to get that child opted out. That is very rare. And even getting an accommodation to get a separate setting for testing because a child is a behavior concern and could impact the test taking skills and abilities and capabilities of other students in their classroom, like they don't encourage that. That was a very rare and surprising thing. And that only happened that one year when I had that student that was not allowed the next year. But if you have a student who's in a class with others that express these behavioral struggles, then put all of the testing environment on top of that, what is going to happen? Is it going to be the best environment for students, especially if the student doesn't care about state testing and doesn't care about how other kids do on state testing? So it's definitely stressful when trying to sort out accommodations and behavioral concerns and academic concerns. I know we tried to get one of my students who was a fourth grader who's at a level of writing their own name, and that was about it. And all the work we had put in to working with this student in the past year, like we knew what this test was going to do, and the student got separate learning environment, and maybe the math directions were read aloud, but that was it. Like, are we setting students up for success when we force a student who we already know what the score will be, where they're going to land? We're still forcing that student, that child, to go through this experience. Again, these are my viewpoints going through this. So students who are late kind of sit and twiddle their thumbs. They might go help in another classroom that isn't testing. And students who are sick, they have to it has to be made up. Every student has to be accounted for. This means that the weeks of testing last longer. This pulls special education teachers, this pulls English language learning teachers and administrators and other school support staff out of their normal duties, meaning that they're not serving the students that they're meant to serve, to make sure that every student is tested. And this could take weeks after the weeks of testing. Most states usually have a cutoff, and you just do what you can. So that, just like thinking about the implications of how these teachers who are meant to work with students who have needs and have those supports and can't because they're required to give these standardized tests, that impacts students. And that impacts students, not just the students who are testing, but the students in those younger grades that are not testing. And that leads me to the rest of the school environment. I have taught in different districts as a teacher of a primary grade classroom, and it impacts them. It makes learning changes during testing weeks. Recesses become indoors in many places. We cannot travel to go outside and play on the playgrounds because they're usually too close to where the testing is happening. And so administrators, district officials, state officials, the rules are there somewhere where you say if you have recess, it has to be indoor. I have heard some teachers in other places say that they don't get their PE classes because it's too loud. And they are told not even indoor recess. So these kids, these kindergartens, first graders, second graders, they get no breaks at all. They sit in the classroom the whole time. In some places, it's discouraged to allow students to be in the hallway at all. So the bathroom breaks, the ability for kids to take care of their bodily needs who are not testing are still impacted because of the testing of other students. The goal is to limit students in the hallway. I have seen teachers get in trouble if their students are not quiet enough. I have heard about reprimands that other teachers have received because their students are being children and not little robots that just turn it off whenever they're told to. But so this is how it impacts the students directly. Indirectly, again, there's a whole bunch of staff that services these children that are unable to service for weeks because they are demanded to be testing. That is a really big deal because that support that these students rely on and has shown progress is now taken away for a standardized test. And that can do damage to their learning projection and their academic success. It's a lot on those other students and on the teachers that are relying on that support staff because they are supposed to be there. Legally, if that student has an individualized education plan, legally, they need to be getting these services. It cannot be on just one teacher to provide this. That's why we have the support staff. If we have English language learners, they need to have that more focused time working on language development in a way that I can't do in my classroom of 26 kids. Administrators are tougher to get in contact with. A lot of the time, the biggest behavior concerns of students get a whole bunch more freedom with being out of the classroom so that they have less chance to elope, which is leave the classroom, get in the hallway, get out of the school. So they're not draining those that support staff or that administration attention so that it can be focused on testing. I've had a student who during testing was just hanging out in another classroom for the day because we knew that that student would stay there as opposed to being challenged to learn, would elope the classroom and cause a whole bunch of ruckus. So this impacts everybody. This changes the environment of the classroom and of the school, and it impacts learning. In my opinion, it definitely impacts learning of every single student. So that is kind of what it looks like on the inside of testing weeks. And there are some administrators who get really hard on teachers because of whatever results come from these tests. And I will share my thoughts on putting too much oomph on standardized testing because I know that some of the research will support this and it will be better placed in another video, but just an idea is standardized tests are not written at the grade level the students are in. These are very challenging for students who are, on level with grade level expectations. They are still challenging. And that doesn't include the mental and emotional stress that students deal with when it comes to taking tests because of the pressure that the outside world has put on it. I can tell my students, I don't care what the test says. I know what you know. I could give you a report card without this test. I know exactly where you're at. I know what you need support in. I know what you rock at. I can tell them that all day, every day, but the environment outside of everything I say does not always support what I'm saying. And it's difficult, and it's getting more difficult. So just some of these thoughts, some kind of um, insider viewpoints on testing. So thank you for listening. I'll post more soon. Have a great day.